Okay, Hans, it's an honor to meet you, sir.
Well, thanks for having me.
I watched you a lot on television regarding voter fraud. I think you were probably one of the most known expert out there. And I want to first start off with what's going on in South Korea. South Korea, President Yoon is facing impeachment. I think the decision might be made by the Constitutional Court, probably early March or mid-March. I wanted to know your opinion about it. Have you been following this news?
Well, I don't do foreign policy, so I haven't been following it closely. But look, any time you have a suspension of elections, anytime you have, for example, a country bringing the military in to run elections, I mean, that's not a way to run a fair election. You know, in the United States, there's actually a federal law that prohibits the military from being in polling places or having anything to do with it because they want to avoid any kind of problems of intimidation or other things that could cause.
What made you interested in studying and researching about voter fraud? Was it the 2016 election or prior to that?
No, I've been working on this for a long time because, like a lot of Americans, I'm a son of immigrants. My father was Russian. My mother was German. She grew up in Nazi Germany. My father escaped communism twice. And as a child here, I was taught the importance of the ability to vote and to choose our representatives. And so anytime I would see problems that I thought should be fixed, that interested me.
Oh, okay. And let's talk about the 2016 presidential election, which 2016 is okay, but in 2020,
right.
I felt there was rigging that was happening, like what President Trump said. Can you talk about, like on the media side, media being so lopsided, pretty much being a cheerleader for the Democratic Party, right. And also hiding the fact about the Hunter Biden laptop story, as well as all the newspaper media, all the newspaper outlets just endorsing, Joe Biden. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big problem with what we label the mainstream media in this country, is that all too often they do not act as journalists and reporters. They act as if they work for one political party, the Democratic Party. And unfortunately, a prime example of that was the story about Hunter Biden's laptop. That laptop was, as you know, seized by the FBI. It had all kinds of evidence on it of the corrupt financial dealings of Hunter Biden and members of his family. And yet the media, when it had absolutely no proof whatsoever that this was a piece of Russian disinformation. In fact, it was the opposite. Yeah. The FBI knew it was real. And yet, what does the media do? They spread a story, this is just Russian disinformation. They don't cover it. They tell their reporters, you can't do a story about it. Why would they do that? For only one purpose. Because they wanted to help Joe Biden win the presidential election. And as you know, polling has shown that would have changed the vote of a large number of Americans. And that was
17%?
Yeah, that was a betrayal of what reporters and journalists and the media are supposed to do, which is go after the facts, publish them, and then let the American people themselves decide what to do about that.
So they always talk about Russia, right? It's always Russia. Right. Intruding our election system. What do you think about Crossfire Hurricane? Do you think that's also election interference?
It was.
The mainstream media, not just the mainstream media, you have John Brennan, James Clapper, all these deep staters talking about that Trump was Putin's puppet, and all this narrative. You saw the Time magazine having the White House changing into the Kremlin house.
Yeah, and it was all a hoax.
It was all a hoax.
Right.
So you view that as an election interference?
Oh, I do, most certainly. And unfortunately, the FBI was involved in that because the FBI look, that entire hoax was concocted by the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Yes.
as opposition research. They made it up. They paid someone to make it up. And yet the FBI used that as a basis to open investigation, ignoring all of their standard rules on verifying information before you started. And look, they even abused our FISA law. You know, we have the special law, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which is what our government is supposed to use if they believe someone is a foreign agent engaged in espionage.
They did that to Carter Page, right?
Yeah, they used that to put in electronic surveillance of a member of the Trump team when they not only had no basis for it, but individuals in the government actually lied to the court to justify getting that. That's why, you know, we've just had Kash Patel confirmed by the Senate.
That's one of the greatest news that I've heard.
Yeah, as the head of the new head of the FBI, and one of the reasons, unfortunately, Democrats were so against him was because he has promised to reform and clean up the FBI, and that is badly needed.
Do you think FBI, as an FBI director, they can do a lot to prevent these election interference? A lot of people don't know this, but can you answer that?
Yeah, they can. I mean, look, just basically going back to what we were just talking about, if the FBI director back then had stepped in and said, we're not opening an investigation, you've got no credible evidence to justify it, none of that would have happened. But that did not occur because we did not have a good FBI director. In fact, we had a partisan FBI director, and somebody good like Kash Patel, I think, can make a real difference.
So when you said there were some officials that lied, you're talking about Kevin Kleinsmith, right? Kleinsmith.
Yeah.
So
we have a Justice Department lawyer lying to the court. And was he held accountable? Well,
6 months. He pleaded guilty. But what I think is, if he would not have pleaded guilty, he might have gotten scot-free.
That's right.
Right. So
and
he was a stupid one in a way.
Yeah, and his bar license was only suspended for a short time, and he's practicing law again.
Is he? I did not know that. Yeah. It's unbelievable. What's going on is just unbelievable, heinous. So we put a lot of faith and expectation to Special Counsel John Durham to uncover all this, but it did not happen. Right. Do you think that Kash Patel would uncover this whole thing? What happened from Crossfire Hurricane to 2020? What happened in 2020? And I don't know, even the Wuhan virus lab thing. I think that was also concocted to bring down Trump. In my view, it's just too much of a happenstance. And even last year, do you think Trump still? It's a convoluted question. Do you think Trump's beat Kamala amidst all the voter fraud that was happening? Was it too big to win?
Look, I think what happened in last year's election was that we had a much better election system, because what happened after 2020 was that a lot of state legislatures, folks need to understand in Korea that here our national government does not dictate our election rules with some exceptions. The rules are dictated by our state governments. Many state governments finally realized that they needed to reform the system, that there were holes in the system. And so they passed improvements. Georgia, for example. Remember, Georgia was
one of the hot states.
It was one of the hot states in 2016. Well, Georgia did something they should have done long ago. The U.S., as you know, allows something that most countries do not, which is absentee or mail ballots. Well, Georgia had a great identification law. It required you, when you showed up to vote in person, to pull out and show a photo ID issued by the government. However, that didn't apply to absentee ballots. So Georgia changed this law in 2021 and extended its ID requirement to mail-in or absentee ballots.
That was ridiculous.
And in the 2024 election last year, first of all, a much smaller number of people used mail-in ballots, and you had this ID requirement applied. So the ability for fraud to occur was greatly lessened in Georgia, and as you know, the president won that state.
And back to that question, do you think Kash Patel, our new FBI director, do you think he should uncover all of the shenanigans that has been going on? Because all the judicial system being so lopsided. It was held in D.C. and Virginia, right? With, what's his name? Igor Danchenko. That he was tried on Virginia. He got scot-free, unanimously not guilty. And the other guy, I forgot his name.
Well, I do think, look, what I think is going to happen is...
A total review, you know?
Kash Patel, I think, is going to try to find out what is hidden in the FBI files and make that public. But I have to tell you that while he does have to take into account what has happened in the last few years, particularly when it comes to holding people inside the FBI accountable and potentially disciplining and firing individuals, his biggest task right now is going to be the internal reform of the FBI, depoliticizing it, getting it back to what its focus should be, which is dealing with serious crime.
Yeah. I think Michael Sussman, right? Michael Sussman was also let go scot-free, and a lot of people have been very angry about this whole thing, you know, just like, how come the conservative party, the conservative side, always go to jail? You had Navarro go to jail. You had Steve Bannon go to jail. You know, didn't Roger Stone also go to jail? You know, you had Infowars, Owen Schroyer, he went to jail. We don't see the other side go to jail. I mean, so...
Well, that may change.
That may change with Kash Patel, right?
Well, not just Kash Patel, but look, you have a new Attorney General, Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi has more actual trial experience than probably any Attorney General in American history. You know, not only was she the Attorney General of the state of Florida, but she was a local district attorney for many, many years. She has actual experience in criminal prosecutions, not something you don't always find with attorney generals. And I think they may actually, for example, look what she just did. She sued the state of New York and the state of Illinois for interfering with the federal government's enforcement of our immigration laws against aliens who are in the country illegally. That hasn't been done before. And I'm actually about to publish a paper on the fact that state officials and local officials, they are not immune from being criminally prosecuted if they try to obstruct federal enforcement of our immigration laws.
That's what I think should happen.
And
you know, a lot of people still ask that they want some kind of accountability from like Andy McCabe, James Comey, and also Peter Strzok, Lisa Page. You had these emails going back and forth, these lovebirds, you know, saying they would do anything in their power to bring down Trump and make sure that they're going to have an insurance policy about it. It's maddening. And he erased all of his ex-posts yesterday. 2 days ago. What do you think is going to happen with them? And you had the Justice Department pay them how much? $2 million. You know, they had a settlement, which is another kind of a double whammy. And people see these kind of injustice happen in America. And how can we expect any kind of justice around the world if America is so rotten like this?
Well, look, I think you actually finally have a president who's trying to do something about all of these issues. I mean, just look at the actions he's taken. You know, you and I are talking today, and it's exactly 1 month. 1 month since he was inaugurated. And he's taken more actions with regard to the federal government than any president I can recall ever in their first month. And many of the things he's doing is trying to hold them accountable.
Greatest ever, I think.
Right. Remember, we were just talking about the Hunter Biden laptop. Well, what is one of the first things he did? He removed the security clearances of the 53 intelligence officials who were part of that political effort.
They were all deep staters.
Yeah. And that will affect them. It's going to be hard for them to find jobs with defense contractors and others if they no longer have a clearance. Look, there are different kinds of accountability. The Department of Justice may be looking at potential criminal prosecutions when they can, but there are other things that the the president can do, which he is doing, like removing people's top security clearances, which is that's a real blow to them.
Do you think, Trump, even though he won last year's election, he still talks about voter fraud, that we want single day voting and just make it an election holiday or something, in that sort. Is he focusing on this voter fraud issue, or do you think this is going to come down the road? Because I don't think he's taking any specific action so far ever since.
Well, no, I think the people that he's putting in are going to do something about it. And I'll give you a specific example. Prior to last year's election, the U.S. Justice Department did something absolutely ridiculous. The state of Virginia announced that it had found 6,300 individuals who were registered to vote who were not U.S. citizens.
Wow.
Okay?
That's amazing.
Now that's illegal. It's a violation of federal law. So what happens? The Justice Department sued them and said, "Oh, you can't remove that."
I remember that news. I almost forgot it. I almost forgot it because of the crazy news cycle.
But just a day or so ago, what did the new Justice Department do? They threw out that suit and dismissed it. Okay, so that means that frees up states to, when they find aliens on the rolls, to take them off. That's a clear indication of how things have changed and what they're going to do with it. There'll be more actions once the woman that he has nominated to be head of the Civil Rights Division, that's the division inside the Justice Department that deals with voting issues. Once she is confirmed, I think you'll see a lot more action.
That only happened because Trump won, but I'm imagining, what if he didn't win? It would have been it would have been horrendous. The dictators took over the entire country.
Right.
So I don't know whether, Hans, you remember last year during Election Day in Michigan, there was a Chinese foreign student
who voted.
That.
Yes.
And the Secretary of State, maddeningly, I was hopping mad about it. The person said that it will be counted as a legal vote.
Right.
I mean, would this be fixed next time around?
Well, it'll be fixed.
That will be stayed, right?
It'll be fixed if, for example, Congress is able to pass a bill that right now they're about to start pushing again. It's called the SAVE Act.
The SAVE Act.
And the SAVE Act would require all states, when you register to vote, you would have to provide proof that you are a U.S. citizen. So the Republicans, that would have prevented what happened in Michigan. Because in Michigan, you get registered to vote, they don't verify that you're a U.S. citizen.
So when that news broke out, it made me suspicious about China, CCP. Is CCP actively involved in election interference in America right now, in your opinion?
Look, I don't know how to answer that. We have folks in our National Security Division at Heritage who probably could. I have no doubt they want to. And I have no doubt that they may be working at trying to do that. But as to what exactly they're doing, that I can't answer.
I'm asking you this because a lot of South Koreans who support President Yoon and who support his martial law declaration because he wanted to uncover the voter fraud issue that has been going on in the National Election Commission, which has not been properly audited for 50 plus years. A lot of South Koreans believe that CCP is behind the voter fraud that has been happening in South Korea. And I don't know whether are you familiar with the A-Web controversy in South Korea?
No, sorry.
Okay, then I won't ask you about that. But so a lot of South Koreans, they probably want to ask you this question. Would America take any kind of real action to uncover it, or you can't talk about, or what was your...
I don't know the answer.
Got it. I understand.
As you know, President Trump has been trying to put pressure on a lot of different countries to resolve a lot of issues and using all kinds of foreign policy tools to do that. What he would do about that situation, I don't know. But that is something that's concerning. When it comes to election audits, look, I published one of the first papers more than a year ago.
We should audit every election.
That we should audit every election. Every election should be audited. That, as you know, look, that's a standard thing in the business world. Every public corporation has to undergo an audit, and every election in every jurisdiction should have to undergo an audit too.
Do you support single-day election and in-person only election, other than like absentee, like very?
Yes. Yeah.
You do.
Yeah. I don't like the way we have expanded absentee or mail-in voting in this country. I don't have a problem reserving it for people who really can't make it to the polling place. If someone is so physically disabled they can't make it to the polling place, fine. But we've expanded it in many states. Anybody can do it, and that is a risky way of running an election because it's too easy to commit fraud.
Like, for instance, since I'm in LA, LA County, I think years ago, they erased, because of Judicial Watch suing them, I think they erased 1.2 million, and some people said 2 million voters out of the voter roll.
But these were all people who were ineligible. They were no longer there. They had died, they had moved away, and they shouldn't have been on the rolls anymore.
Yeah, and you had some states that had like their pets having their. It's just insane what's going on in this, in America for such a long time, and people have been waking up. Do you think that it was a good thing for President Trump, in retrospect, to get him out of the office for a while, so people can had 4 years to think about what has been going on?
Well, look, it was very hard on him, but
it was hard on us too.
But like I said, it made many state legislators realize they needed to improve the system, and they did in many states. But second, I think the reason he's doing such a good job right now is because he had 4 years
to contemplate
and prepare for a second term.
Yeah, right. So what do you expect him to do from here on out? Now it's pretty much all of his cabinet is the important ones. Right. They call it the Justice League. I want to call it the Justice League or Avengers or whatever you want. It's like a dream come true. I couldn't even imagine that this day would come. Tulsi Gabbard, Pam Bondi, Pete Hegseth, all the people that the critics said that would be impossible to go through, like Robert Kennedy Jr. They all went in. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think this is truly a golden age for the United States of America?
I've been thinking about writing an article about the Second American Revolution, because in many ways, our government has gotten as bad or worse than the British monarchy that we revolted against over 250 years ago. And I think that many of the things that they are doing with the Trump administration is to bring us back to our roots and the way we want our government to be. And you know what the greatest right is that Americans believe in?
What is it?
A lot of people say, the First Amendment.
Second
No. The greatest right that Americans believe in is the right to be left alone by the government.
True.
And that is behind almost everything that Trump is doing.
Do you agree with the statement that somebody said that, I forgot, but Trump achieved more to making the government smaller with the help of Elon Musk than what Ronald Reagan did in the 80s for his entire 8 years? Because President Reagan talked about smaller government.
He's clearly trying to do that. Yes. Yeah, and I think he has a great opportunity here, and I think he has a great likelihood of success.
Hans, can you tell our audience what you do at Heritage Foundation and so forth?
Sure. I'm a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. I work on election issues, election integrity. I work on immigration issues, but I also work on other things like the importance of the First Amendment. And because I worked at the U.S. Department of Justice, I've written a lot about how the Justice Department needs to be reformed from the inside out.
And can you also give our audience your last words and some encouraging words of South Koreans who want voter integrity happening in South Korea and a proper auditing of the National Election Commission?
What I would say to folks is don't just expect the government and government officials to do it. You need to personally get involved at your local level. That's been a key difference in the U.S. is ordinary citizens getting involved in this. You know, what happened after the 2020 election was all of these citizens formed what we call grassroots organizations all over the country, pushing for election reforms, auditing of elections, etc. And it takes vigilant citizens to help ensure that happens.
So people need to rise up.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your great advice and thank you for our interview.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Thank you.